The hall was glowing. Golden chandeliers spilled light across white draped tables. Roses in crystal vases perfumed the air. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the space with warmth. For a moment, it was everything I had ever dreamed of. My wedding day. I looked around at the faces of family and friends. Some had traveled miles to be here, some I hadn't seen in years, and all of them had gathered to celebrate what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My heart swelled as I caught sight of him, my new husband, smiling, glass in hand, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, the man I believed I could trust forever. He rose to speak. It was time for the toast. The room quieted. Cameras turned toward him, eyes sparkled with anticipation. Everyone leaned forward, ready to hear words of love, gratitude, and devotion. I held my breath. My hands rested gently on the tablecloth, waiting for the moment that would seal our union, not just legally, but emotionally, publicly, eternally. And then he spoke. He laughed lightly into the microphone and said, "Don't worry, everyone. If this doesn't work out, I'll just leave her." For a moment, silence. Then scattered laughter, nervous chuckles, awkward glances passed around the room. But my heart stopped. The words hit like a slap. I stared at him, trying to process. Surely I misheard. Surely he didn't mean it. Surely this was some terrible joke gone wrong. But no, he was smiling, smiling at his own cruelty. And worse, some of the guests laughed with him, not knowing the knife those words had driven into me. The room blurred. The clinking glasses sounded far away. My chest tightened, my breath caught. I forced a smile, cheeks burning, because what else could I do? The spotlight was on us, but inside, I was collapsing. Carl Jung once said, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality." And in that moment, his shadow revealed itself. The truth he had hidden, the contempt he masked, the lack of respect he thought he could disguise as humor. It was all laid bare in that single joke, and I realized something I never expected to feel on my wedding day. I wasn't safe with him. The rest of the room moved on. The laughter faded into more toasts, more chatter, more glasses raised. But I sat frozen, staring at my plate, at my untouched glass, at the man beside me who had just humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. Inside, a storm raged. How dare he, on this day of all days? How dare he take my dream and taint it with ridicule? How dare he use our wedding, the one moment meant to be sacred, as a stage for mockery? And perhaps the cruelest thought of all, if he's willing to say this now in public, what will he do in private tomorrow, next year, a decade from now? I smiled for the photographs. I thanked guests who congratulated me. I nodded and played the role of the happy bride. But with every passing minute, the fire inside me grew hotter. This wasn't love. This wasn't respect. This wasn't what I deserved. And while everyone expected me to laugh it off, to swallow the pain, to move on, deep down I knew I couldn't. Because his joke wasn't a joke. It was a warning. And I had to decide whether I would ignore it or act on it. Let me ask you, have you ever been the punchline of someone else's joke? Have you ever been laughed at when you should have been loved? If you have, then you know how sharp that laughter feels. How isolating it is to be humiliated in a moment meant to be cherished. That was me, sitting in my wedding dress, surrounded by roses and candlelight, feeling more alone than I ever had before. But here's the thing, humiliation has a strange power. Sometimes it breaks you, and sometimes it wakes you up. That night, it woke me up, because he thought he was making a joke, but I was already planning my exit. The toast lingered in the air long after the glasses clinked and the guests laughed nervously. He sat back down beside me, still smiling, still pleased with himself, as though he had just told the funniest story in the world. His arm brushed against mine, casual, careless, like nothing had happened. But for me, everything had happened. I could feel the burn on my cheeks, the way my heart hammered against my chest, the way my stomach twisted. Everyone else returned to their conversations. The music swelled again, forks scraped against plates, servers poured more wine. The world moved on, but I couldn't. That joke wasn't just a joke, it was a crack in the foundation of everything we had built. I sat there in silence, staring at the tablecloth, tracing the embroidered patterns with my finger, pretending to listen as guests leaned in to talk to me. I nodded when I had to. I smiled when it was expected, but my mind was spinning. Inside, I was screaming. How could he do this? How could he take this day, this moment, and use it to humiliate me? Because that's what it was, humiliation. It wasn't about humor, it wasn't about being lighthearted, it was about power, about reminding me and everyone else that he held it, that he could reduce me to a punchline in the very moment that should have been sacred. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And in that moment, his unconscious slipped out of his mouth. The disrespect, the disregard, the lack of love he had disguised for so long under smiles and promises, it was all laid bare, and I had to face the truth. This wasn't fate. This was a choice, and I didn't have to choose it. As I sat there, my ears filled with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses, I noticed the looks. Some guests avoided my eyes, uncomfortable, as if they had witnessed something they shouldn't. Others gave me small, pitying smiles, the kind that sting more than silence. A few even chuckled along, as if it really was funny, as if my pain was entertainment. And I realized something I had never wanted to admit. No one was going to save me from this. Not my family, not my friends, not even the ones who claimed to love me. If I wanted out, I would have to save myself. I forced myself to eat a bite of food, but it turned to ash in my mouth. I tried to sip my champagne, but it only burned. Every sound, every smile, every sparkle of that night felt hollow. He leaned close, whispering something meant to be sweet, but all I heard was the echo of his toast. "If this doesn't work out, I'll just leave her." The words looped in my head, louder and louder, until I could barely hear anything else. And I thought, if he can say that on our wedding day, in front of everyone, then what will he say tomorrow, next year, when no one is watching? The silence inside me grew, not the silence of submission, not the silence of shame, but the silence of decision. Let me ask you, have you ever sat in a room full of people and felt completely alone? Have you ever smiled through humiliation, pretending you were fine while inside you were breaking apart? That's what I felt at that table. Everyone thought the evening was moving on, but inside I knew something they didn't. My marriage was already over, and I was already planning my exit. The music played on. The waiters moved gracefully between the tables, balancing trays of champagne flutes and plates of roasted chicken. The chatter of guests filled the room, punctuated by bursts of laughter. From the outside, the night looked perfect. But inside, I was unraveling. I kept replaying his words in my head. "If this doesn't work out, I'll just leave her." It wasn't just the cruelty of the statement. It was the carelessness. The way he said it, as if my worth, our vows, this entire day meant nothing. The way he shrugged it off, expecting everyone to laugh, expecting me to smile, expecting me to swallow the humiliation like it was part of the deal. And for years, maybe it would have been, because that's what I had done. I'd excused the small comments, the subtle digs, the moments of disrespect brushed off as jokes. I had told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that he didn't mean it, that he loved me deep down. But love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't turn the most sacred day of your life into a punchline. I looked around the room, at the flowers I had chosen, the music I had picked, the dress I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. And I realized none of it mattered if the person standing beside me saw me as disposable. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about one bad joke. This was about a truth I had been avoiding. He didn't value me. And if I stayed, I would spend a lifetime shrinking, excusing, pretending. The spark of clarity burned inside me. I wasn't going to wait for him to leave me. I wasn't going to give him the chance. I was going to leave first. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And in that moment, I understood. His words had been the spark, but I was the reaction. I wasn't going to let this transform me into bitterness or self-doubt. I was going to let it transform me into courage. I sat in silence for the rest of dinner, the decision growing stronger with every bite I couldn't swallow, with every fake smile I forced. My heart was racing, not with fear, but with determination. The dessert hadn't been served yet. The night was still young, but my marriage was already over, and I wasn't going to wait for the world to find out years later. I was going to show them now. Let me ask you, have you ever had that moment of clarity where the fog lifts, where the noise fades, and you see the truth so clearly it terrifies you? That was me at that table. He thought he was in control. He thought he could humiliate me and I would stay. He thought I was trapped. But he was wrong, because the spark had been lit. And before dessert was served, I was going to walk away. The moment came quietly. The band had shifted to a soft melody. The waiters were preparing the dessert course in the back, the clatter of plates faint beneath the music. Guests were laughing, talking, sipping their wine. To anyone watching, the night looked perfect again. But inside me, the decision was already made. I pushed my chair back slowly. The sound of it scraping against the polished floor seemed louder than the music, louder than the conversations, louder than my pounding heart. Heads turned. Forks froze mid-air. He looked at me, confused. "Where are you going?" he whispered, still smiling, as if I were about to play along with some unspoken joke. I looked him in the eye. And for the first time, I didn't shrink. "This isn't a joke," I said softly. "Not for me." The smile faltered on his face. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my dress, my legs trembling but steady. The room fell into an uneasy hush. Guests watched with wide eyes, wine glasses half raised, whispers starting to ripple like waves. I walked, past the roses, past the chandeliers, past the cameras that had captured every forced smile of the night. I walked through the silence of shock, the sting of judgment, the pity of strangers. And I didn't look back. Behind me I heard his chair scrape. His footsteps quickened. His voice, sharp now, chased after me. "Wait, I was kidding. Come on, it was just a joke." But the thing about jokes is that they reveal the truth, and his truth had been spoken. I stopped at the doorway, turned to face him and said loud enough for the entire room to hear, "This marriage is over before it even began. I won't spend my life as a punchline." Gasps filled the room. Some guests covered their mouths. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or remain silent. He stood frozen, his mouth open, but no words came. Because deep down, he knew I was right. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That night, his unconscious revealed itself in front of everyone. He wanted me small, diminished, disposable. But I refused to call that fate. So I walked away. The air outside was cold against my skin, sharp and bracing. For the first time that night, I could breathe. My heart still raced, my hands still shook, but my soul was steady. Behind me, the celebration continued awkwardly. Some guests stayed, some left, some would gossip for years about the bride who walked out before dessert. Let them talk. Because I had done something braver than cutting the cake. I had cut myself free. Let me ask you, have you ever walked away in the middle of the story, refusing to wait for the ending others had written for you? Have you ever chosen yourself, even when the world expected you to stay? That was me, standing in the cold night air, veil trembling in the wind, heart pounding with both fear and freedom. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. I would never again sit quietly while someone made me the punchline of my own life. The morning after was quiet. No bouquet on the nightstand, no husband beside me. Just silence and the faint ache of everything that had collapsed the night before. My phone buzzed endlessly, messages from family, friends, even strangers who had been at the wedding. Some were filled with shock, some with pity, some with admiration. "Are you okay? We couldn't believe what happened. You're so brave." And then, of course, his messages, long paragraphs alternating between apologies and excuses. "It was just a joke. You overreacted. We can still fix this." But deep down I knew the truth. You don't joke about leaving someone on the day you vowed to stay. The days that followed were a blur of whispers and headlines. Some people said I had ruined my own wedding. Others said I had saved my own life. At first, the weight of judgment pressed on me. I cried into my pillow, wondering if I had done the right thing, wondering if I had been too impulsive, too dramatic, too unforgiving. But then I remembered the look on his face when he made that toast, the smirk, the casual cruelty, the way he expected me to laugh along, and suddenly the doubt faded. Because I hadn't walked away from a wedding, I had walked away from a lifetime of being diminished. Carl Jung once said, "I'm not what happened to me, I'm what I choose to become." And that became my mantra. I was not the bride who was humiliated. I was not the woman who was abandoned by a joke. I was the woman who chose to become something greater, free. Over time, the whispers turned into respect. People stopped talking about the scandal and started talking about the courage. Friends told me, "I wish I had done what you did years ago." Strangers messaged me, saying my story gave them strength to walk away from their own toxic relationships. And slowly, I realized, my pain had become my power. That night had not been the end of my story. It had been the beginning. Now, when I think back to that night, I don't remember the humiliation. I don't remember the sting of laughter or the silence of the room. I remember the sound of my own footsteps as I walked out. I remember the cold night air filling my lungs. I remember the first breath of freedom. Let me ask you one last time. Have you ever had the courage to leave before you were left? Have you ever walked away, even when the world expected you to stay? If you have, then you know the truth I found that night. Liberation comes the moment you choose yourself. So yes, at my wedding toast, he joked about leaving me. But I left him before dessert was served. And in doing so, I chose myself before anyone else could choose to abandon me. Tell me in the comments, what moment in your life taught you the power of walking away? Subscribe for more emotional stories of heartbreak, healing, and transformation. Share this with someone who needs to hear you don't have to wait to be left to finally leave. And I'll leave you with Jung's words one final time. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that night, I finally became me.